Hello, hello, hello once again. Thank you for joining us. It's Let's Talk 1943. We are back. We had a little break last time. It was actually my birthday. So I took it off and I did the best of Let's Talk because I wanted to celebrate my birthday. But we are back for another episode, another great episode. Um, Before we get started, I just wanted to do a little introduction before we get started, but we have Paul Henderson, and he's an author, and we're going to talk about his book, Slave No More. So, as I always say, you ready to talk? Let's get it in. We're back. We're back to Let's Talk 1943. As I said, we have caller, of course, my ride or die here, my co-host, Colin Morgan, and we are going to introduce Paul Henderson. He is a dean of students, author, and a motivational speaker. He's a former track star, field athlete at Virginia Commonwealth University. He is a blogger as well. He has a blog, Fatherhood on the Fly, where his slogan is "We learning, we're growing, and we're getting better one day at a time." He used to he encouraged me, and he has motivational speaking, as I said. Slave No More, Overcoming the Master Within. Paul's first book was released this year in January of 2022. Paul is married to Kiara and has four sons, PJ, Joey, David, and Noah. So welcome, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you so much, Regina and Carla, for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation all day, and hey, let's do it. Let's do
Yeah,
it.
let's do it. Let's do it. So, we were just talking before the show. We had some things in common. He actually went to Commonwealth, Virginia Commonwealth, and me and Colin went to a school right down the road, about 20 minutes, Virginia State University.
Right.
So we know the same kind of stomping grounds, the Richmond, Petersburg area. So that is good to know. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the book, Slave No More. Tell us about the title. What does the title mean?
Right. So here's it right here. The slave no more, conquering the master within. So a little bit of the backstory is I was actually a history major at Virginia Commonwealth University or VCU, and a lot of the courses that I studied, centered around slavery. And as a matter of fact, I just caught up with one of my professors who I took a lot of his courses when I was in school, Dr. Bernard Moy. I caught up with him last week, and it was pretty good to hear his voice after so many years. And so what would happen is I would see what happened in the 1860s when they issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And what happened is some slaves, they went out there and they pursued their freedom, and then there were others who basically went back and worked for that same slave master. So it was almost like they were slaves, but without the title, right?
Right.
So what happened, and I guess just the teacher in me, motivational speaker, I did a lot of sports chaplain and campus chaplain work as well. What I would do is I would see situations in life where you saw that similar parallel. For example, you have person A who has one set of circumstances, and person B has the exact same set of circumstances. Now, person A finds a way to overcome, to fight their way through. They identify a strong vision to help them overcome that set of circumstances. Meanwhile, person B says, you know what, this is what I've dealt with, and they continue to talk about it over and over and over again. So it's almost like they're held bound when they don't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And now, one thing I'm always, certain to say is that no matter what anyone has gone through, I never downplay in anyone's set of circumstances, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
because whatever you've gone through, whatever your background is, whatever challenges you faced in life, they're real. They're absolutely real to you, and they're real in general. But what I do believe is that if you truly choose, if you make that choice, you definitely can overcome. Not there may be some bumps in the road, but you
Mm-hmm.
definitely can overcome if you choose to.
You have said something that is I use as an analogy all the time about the lid and the butterfly, and you have the butterfly in the container, and it keeps hitting the top of the container. And it got so accustomed to hitting that top, it didn't even start. It didn't look anymore. So one day somebody let the top off, and instead of them keep looking up to look up, they kept going to the same place and kept going back down because they were so accustomed to the lid being on. They didn't realize they were free. They only had to
Right.
look up and realize they could leave.
Sure.
So that's what reminded me when you said that, is the analogy of a lot of times we in situations that we don't have to be in. Like, we kind of accustomed to being in them, so we don't even look to try to get out of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And I'll just make this point just once again, just to be sure that I'm clear. Even the slaves that went back and worked for that same slave master, I can't imagine how hard it was for those who chose to overcome. I can't imagine how hard it was for them to do that. So it's not that I can necessarily knock it, if you will, but I think, but the one thing that I've seen just through reading of stories of former slaves who overcame, they took some bumps in the road, but they kept that vision ahead of them, and that helped them to overcome. And you're right, it is, figuring out how can I remove this lid, how can I break through whatever this glass ceiling that may be. And once again, it's not without bumps in the road. It's going to be challenges. There are
Mm-hmm.
challenges along the way, absolutely. But
Mm-hmm.
the point is, if you choose to overcome, as discussed in my book, in the form of story, you'll see that it's an absolutely possibility for you.
And I think that's anybody. I mean, we all have things we have to overcome or overcame and still overcoming. But
Sure.
the whole point is, failure is when you don't do anything. That's failure.
Right.
Failure is when you don't do
Absolutely.
nothing. You cannot
Hmm.
fail if you try. You may make mistakes and realize that's not for you, and you just kind of navigate it. You move it over or go another route, but it's not failure. See, a lot of people take failure as you try and it didn't work. It just didn't work the way it's supposed to, or not in your favor. You just go on and do something else. But the ones who usually criticize you are the ones who don't move. They're the ones that stuck. And they
Absolutely.
put their fears on you by saying, see, I told you, you should have tried. Do what I do. To sit here, and then it may not go your way, but it won't go worse.
Right. Right. Right.
You
Right. Right.
know,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what?
it's fear.
Well, so what I did with this book is, there's it's once again, it's inspirational fiction, and what it does is it follows the storyline. There's a character. His name is Bobby, and Bobby's about 25 years old. He's in corporate America, and what's happening is he's trying to figure out life. Right? He's
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out life, and it's almost like every time he faces some type of trial or tribulation
Mm-hmm.
on his job, he's reminded of something that his mom said to him, that his dad said to him, that his coach said to them, or some past life circumstance where it's almost like he hears that failure just ringing in his ear, or he hears that discouragement. It just overtakes him every time, that he's struggling on his job. And I don't know about you all, but I've definitely dealt with that. I mean, part of the reason I created Bobby and his manners because of some things that I dealt with. For example, there was an instance in the book where it talks about how Bobby, every time he was dealing with a team project on his job, he never wanted to be the weakest link. And then he goes on to discuss that when he was in college, his coach said, you know what, we could have the best secondary. For those who don't follow football, that's like the cornerbacks and safeties, and this is basically a defensive player. We could
Mm-hmm.
have the best secondary in our entire conference. But Bobby, if I'm honest, you're the weakest link. So his mind was conditioned. The way he took it was that, hey, you know what? I don't want to be the weakest link. And that same thought process followed him, to his job in corporate America. Now that thing happened. That actually happened with me when I was in high school, and back in 2002. My 4x800 relay team, we came in ranked like number 15 in the state. We actually finished number 3 in the state. Earlier that year, my coach actually said to me, and his coach that I actually like really look up to this day. But one thing he said to me in order to motivate me earlier that year was that, Paul, we could have one of the best teams in the state, but if I'm honest, you're the weakest link. So basically, I took what happened to me there and I put that in Bobby's character. Now, what happened with me? Once I began to, once I worked, in nonprofits, once I got in corporate America, I dealt with that thing for the longest time. I don't want to be the weakest link. I don't want to be the low man on my sales team. I'm a part of a leadership team now in the school, which we'll get to a little later. I don't want to be the weakest link there. I always want to be sure that I'm showing up. So, but what I didn't realize was that the only reason my coach said that was really because he was just trying to motivate me. And he knew that would get under my skin enough for me to run like my hair was on fire. He meant it in a good way, but the way I took it was in a way, man, like he called me the weakest link. He called me the weakest link again, So what happens is we see that a lot with people. Now, my coach was trying to motivate me, but the reality is, whether it's parents, whether it's teachers, whether it's coaches, some people actually go through situations like this where their parents or people who they hold in high regard say things, or I like to call speak bad words or speak negative over them, and they take it to heart, and they have a hard time overcoming that thing. What we see in my book is you see Bobby through hearing people's stories and people telling them how they overcame their challenges. He's starting to realize, you know what? I can overcome. I don't have to be bound to this thought that I'm the weakest link. Maybe I'm not to blame for all the struggles that my parents had. Maybe I'm not to blame, for X, Y, and Z. Perhaps I can overcome if I choose to. And one of my favorite things that I did in writing this book was interview people who had these amazing stories, and I'm learning from them as they are telling me their stories of overcoming, and then I put their stories in my book, and Bobby's learning from them, one story at a time. Yeah. And it really, as I was learning,
That's our model in our show. We learn as we go.
So
we learn. We do the same thing. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Carl.
So would you say that? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah. So what would you say the common thread is with all these people that built that, as far as the overcoming aspect with Bobby? What would you say the common thread is with that?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because I was hoping, I thought that I knew what the common thread was, but I wanted to see if it was clear as I read the book, and as different people read it, they told me that they saw it. The common thread with each person was they developed a strong vision. There was some goal out there that they identified, and the more they kept their eyes and their focus on their goal, the more they were able to overcome. One story, Carla is her name in the book is Rosa Rogers. And I won't give it all away because we got to go out there and buy it, right? So we can read it ourselves. But one story that I really enjoyed writing was which I'm actually kind of going to switch it up a little bit. His name is Willie Nolan. He's actually a friend of mine. His name is actually Nolan Wilson. He's an attorney here in Virginia. And one story I really enjoyed interviewing him, because we went to church together for quite some time. His dad was actually my pastor, and I knew that Nolan was blind. Like, he's blind, and but at the same time, he's an attorney. So I'm trying to figure out, how is this guy blind, and how is he an attorney? And to come to find out, he graduated from University of Virginia, which is, one of the top law schools. I'm like, okay, this guy's blind. He's an attorney, but he's blind. Like, how did he do this? And I sat down with him, and I heard his story about how he got hit in the eye with a baseball at one time. He got hit by a car, at another time, and in his family, they actually cataracts ran in his family. And I'm like, okay, you did all this, you struggled in school early on. What happened? And he talks about how he was actually about to be put out of school at one point. He was in a specialty school. They were actually on the verge of dismissing him. And his dad asked him a question. He said, what do you want to do, son? He said, just give me one more year. Just give me one more year. And he took that year, he focused, and then he ended up doing very well. He ended up going to, in the book, is State University, but he actually, I'm so sorry about that, because it's probably the wrong conversation. He went to State University, but in reality, he went to Virginia Commonwealth University. But I said State just because I had to make up a school. But for you all, you actually went to Virginia State University.
Yes,
But
we did.
so what happens is once he got to school, he had to identify a vision. And what he had to learn how to do was focus on his strengths. Rather than focusing on his handicap, he chose to focus on his strengths. And the more he focused on his strengths and the more he had that vision in front of him of being an attorney, he actually changed his career path because he said, you know what, this might not work for me due to my eyesight, but what will work? So he actually, the perspective shift was something that I really learned from him. Another thing I learned, he said this when I was interviewing him. He said, you know, some people will say because I changed my major, I quit. He said, but I look at it as I just changed my focus. I realized that this wasn't going well over here, but at the same time I identified that I have a strength over here. So why don't I choose to focus on the strength that I have? And next thing you know, he's at UVA, he's graduating, and now he's supervising like I think like 50, somewhere between 50 and 75 people, you know, in the office here in Richmond, Virginia. But it all started with him identifying a strong vision and saying, you know what, I'm not going to be bound to my physical handicap. It's my choice. Yes, it may take some vision, if you will. It may take a strong vision ahead of me to help me get there. But if I focus, I know I can get there. And he's a living testimony of what developing a strong vision, developing strong focus, and keeping your mindset on where you're headed. Once again, not without bumps in the road. You can definitely get there.
Yeah, what I hear a lot of is mindset. It's basically your
Right.
mindset. You have to have a certain mindset to achieve your goals. You have said something before when we discussed the power of a seed.
Mm-hmm.
So you wanted to elaborate on that, a power of a seed?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know, one thing I've learned is that you know, if you look in the chapter 6 is probably one of my favorite chapters to write, and that's where this is discussed, and it's discussed a little further, and I believe it's in chapter 11 or 12. But the power of a seed, and I remember writing this, and just a little backstory. I worked for Fellowship of Christian Athletes 8 years out once I graduated Virginia Commonwealth University. So I did a lot of sports chaplain work. I spoke on middle school, high school, college campuses. I even spoke for my favorite NFL team, the Philadelphia Eagles, on three separate occasions. And then I actually went into teaching, which is actually had my master's in teaching from Virginia Commonwealth, from VCU. And then, but what happened was halfway through the school year, my school shut down. My school shut down. So I'm left without a job, and for about 6 months, I was out of work, and it was during that time out of work where I had to shift my focus. My wife and I were married for 5 years. We had two children. We had one on the way, and I didn't have a job. So we actually had our third baby, and I was like, man, I've applied for so many different jobs, like hundreds of jobs, and I can't find anything. But what happened was one night, I'll never forget it, April 5th, 2017, there was a friend of mine who came to town, a pastor friend of mine who came to town. He said, maybe it's time for you to shift your focus, if you will. He planted that seed in me that night that maybe this was a good time for me to focus on some things that perhaps I wouldn't have had time to focus on if I were working. And that's when I started writing my book that night. The first word is Bobby was frustrated. And I started writing the book that night. So what would happen is I was writing, I would just start getting these ideas that I don't know that my mind would have had the capacity for if I was working a full-time job at the time. You know, I would apply for jobs in the day, write at night, apply for jobs today, like between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. at night, I'll be writing. And I remember that night, just hearing this thing about the power of a seed, the power of a seed. I'm like, man, we got to do something with this. And I began to think about apples and how, like, if you cut an apple in half, you might see, you know, 4 or 5 seeds. But what the reality is, within every apple lies an orchard, because it takes just a seed to for it to grow a tree. But every tree is going to have different bushels of apples, and every bushel of apples, of course, has apples, and every apple has more seeds that can plant, where you're able to plant even more trees, right? Yeah. So I began to think about life in general. And I like to think about 2 students at my school. One's my son, he was 9 years old. There was another student who was also 9 years old. They're about a month apart, right? Every time my son's teacher would speak life into him, if you will, say, hey, PJ, you are a champion. She's watering the seeds that my wife and I have been planting in him from a young age, right?
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I have taken that responsibility on to raise our children and to speak life into them and tell them everything that they are capable of doing it. So every time his teacher comes and waters that seed, I mean, basically, she's just helping to bring more of that life out of him. On the other hand, some of us have bad seeds that have been planted, whether it's through, words spoken to us or our current life circumstance. There's another 9-year-old kid who's about a month older than my son. I spent a lot of time with this student. I spent a whole lot of time with him. And I remember the first time I told him he was a champion. I said, "You believe me?" He said, "No." I said, "Has anybody ever told you that you're a champion?" He said, "No." And I look at his family situation. He and his brothers and sisters were living with their grandmother, right? They were living with their grandmother. So I'm telling I'm telling him that he's a champion, but he's like, my mom doesn't want me, and my dad doesn't want me. So how in the world can you look at me as a champion if my own parents don't see me as this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is I almost like to look at that bad seed as almost like a spark that can lead to a damaging fire. So what we have to do there is we have to take, I like to call it a fire extinguisher. One thing I did when I didn't have a job, I took my boys to a fire station because I wanted to just kind of get a visual of this.
Mm-hmm.
In this scenario, this guy had bad seeds that had been planted in his life. So we had to extinguish those damaging thoughts, those damaging fires. And we had to say, you know what? Yes, you are a champion. Yes, you are a champion. Yes, you can do it. So what we're doing when we do that is that we're extinguishing that fire, the damaging fire that's leading to damaging thoughts. And then what we have to do after that is we have to cultivate the ground. We have to cultivate the ground. And then later on, once we're speaking life into him again, he's finally able to receive it. Now, these are the same words, but it's a process. It's a process. And everyone doesn't start off. I mean, these are both two Black kids in the same school that come from different situations. Everyone's situation is different. And depending on where you are is how you have to handle the situation. That's one thing I love about what I do as Dean of Students is I'm able to work with each student individually depending on where they are.
Yeah, a lot of people, I know, Carl, we talked about this before. A lot of people don't have that support. A lot of people don't have them words of encouragement. And it's not sometimes the parents don't, it's not like the parents don't want to. Sometimes they don't know how to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So parents, and that's where other like the village that it takes to grow people, that's why other people come in. And that's why you hear stories. You always hear successful people always say, a teacher, like their first grade teacher, their third grade teacher, they always remember their teacher. They know the teacher's name. They remember what the teacher said to them. And they know that's when their life turned. When a teacher or somebody came in their lives and said, hey, you could be this person. And like, oh, I can? They needed someone. Sometimes it wasn't people in their own household, because you have to remember when people are not raised in a certain way, they were just raised to survive.
Sure.
They're like, just go to school because you have to.
That's right.
Whatever, right? You go to school because you have to. They'll watch you do whatever I gotta do. I just gotta go make this money and bring home food for you to eat tonight. Like, we are living day by day in this household. I don't have time after 3 jobs to come home and tell you how great you are.
Right.
That's not like they don't love you. They show you love by feeding you and giving you a home and giving you a roof over your head. That's how people sometimes see love. They don't see love as being a motivational speaker and speaking to you every night before you go to bed. They're like, well, you ate, right? I love you. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's true. I mean, and it's not malice. It's just what they was learned. Their parents did the same thing to them.
That's
right,
true.
Carla? Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. It's a generational thing, I think, too, sometimes. And it's a cycle, because they, like I said, they weren't taught, and then their family, it was just a thing where that we weren't raised like that. Like you said, men, especially the men in the house. If you have a man in the household, like you said, he was here to provide, or the mother, depending. So I'm providing for you. Go to school and do good in school, and then that's it. But there's more to it. You need nurturing, from that parent. So
you need that nurturing. And like this book would be a great source for young men and women who are out there discovering who they are, don't know who they are, don't know where to start. Reading is really fundamental. Like, I mean, I really just started getting into reading. I read because school, I had to read. I had to read, to graduate from colleges and stuff. But I really got into reading the last maybe 4 or 5 years. I really self-help books and stuff like that. And it does change your life. It does change your life. In a book like this, Slave No More, the title alone is like speaks volumes. You don't have to fall into that slave mentality of just being mediocre. You don't have to fall into that slave mentality just to be existing in this world. You actually could be whatever you want to be. And I know that's cliche and everybody always say that, but it's true. It's really true. And the seed that's being planted in you make a difference. So if you're a person who, a younger person listening to our show, or even you're a parent or grandparent of your children, and you don't see them having direction and they kind of just there, they don't talk about what they want to do in the future. They just kind of floating around and just living day by day. Let them get this book, and plant that seed that sometimes we don't know how to do because we wasn't taught. But if a book could sit there and tell you how to plant a seed, and they'll get their own seed planted, and you could kind of cultivate that seed, just like Paul said, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And to a point, to something you said a little earlier about, sometimes I forget what one of you said it. I think it may have been you, Carla, or Regina. I'm not sure who said it, but you talked about how it may be a teacher, who spoke that life into you that perhaps that you weren't getting at home. My track coach, I mentioned him earlier about the whole weakest link thing. And once again, he said that in order to inspire me because he knew that it would get under my skin enough to make me to run faster. And he was absolutely right. But the way I took it was very. I really took it in a negative way, if you will. But here's something else I'll say about him. If it weren't for him, I don't know that I would have ran at VCU. I honestly don't know that because this guy saw so much Jimmy almost after every conversation I had with him. I thought I was going to the Olympics, and I wasn't even the best runner on my team, but I thought I was going to the Olympics because he had a way of just saying you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, which sounds contrary to what he did earlier, but that was just another motivational tactic that he used with me. And I tell you what, he's the reason that I'm in the school that I'm working in the school now. It's because I knew the influence, even though I never had him as a teacher, I knew the impact that he had on my life as a coach. So when I went to VCU and I got my undergrad in history and my master's in teaching, part of my goal was to teach and run track so that I could have the influence on him that he had on, the influence on others that my track coach had on me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then that's important. And see, that's the thing too, that growing up, we had, and I had a lot of it. And I wish now going back thinking I was more involved in some of these programs. We had a lot of kind of mentoring programs for youth and things that you could get into that is out there today. And now you can do it virtually now. You don't even have to physically be there no more. You could just go on and click on a link and be in a motivational class or do whatever. Or you could go to Audibles and listen to all these amazing books, to educate yourself. And a lot of the most people that I see that are very successful are readers. Yeah. They read a lot. They read a lot because it grows their mind. And they actually, like you said earlier, Paul, in the sense of being like that person who don't go past that level. But when you read books, it blows your mind of all the possibilities and what you really about and what you are. Like all of that is in these books. And that's why some people are scared for us to learn.
Right.
That's why you get these dictators and stuff around the world who don't want you to have education. They don't want you to read because they know if you read, you're gonna know more than they do. Right, but no, that's not right. That's not right what you just said. A lot of the people who were followers didn't read. They followed what the leader told them, and they didn't go look for themselves. And then they end up going to doing whatever craziness because they didn't read for themselves what the truth was.
Sure,
like they said, you hide it in books, right? They said, you hide it in books, don't worry, they won't find it.
Yep.
Put it in a
Yep.
book.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, and that's
Exactly.
what people say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really believe so. Another question I have for you. So as we say about this book is for who? Who is this book for?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that. If I had to say there was a sweet spot, I would say, likely young adults would probably be the sweet spot, right? But at the same time, the seventh grade class in my book read it this year. The teacher read it and said, "Paul, would you mind if my class reads your book?" So I actually gifted that class. Each their own copy with a personal note in there, and they read it, and they were able to learn. And it was awesome is in Black History Month, there's a story about a lady who wasn't able to go to school for 5 years because the school system refused to integrate. She's actually my boy's Nana, and so I actually asked her to come up to school and share her story. So you have to read the book to get how she overcame that and end up having a 40-year career in the medical field. You have to read the book for that one. I'm not gonna give that one away today. But she actually came and to my school and she spoke to the entire middle school about how she overcame the challenges that she went through, because when she was out of school, she was actually the age of so many of the students within our school. So you have that. The school that actually shut down, they actually have 3 more campuses. The high school campus up in Charlottesville, Virginia, not too fairly close to University of Virginia. It's a private day alternative school. They bought enough for 2 of their classes, 2 of their high school classes, and so it's gone well there. At the same time, I've had people in their 70s and 80s read the book and tell me how much they've learned from it, and for them, some say it's because they really because mentorship is a big focus as well. Bobby isn't just going through. He's meeting these people randomly and they're telling the stories. He has a mentor named Mr. J, who's introducing him to the people within the book. And what's happening is, as Mr. J is introducing Bobby to these people, they're sharing the stories, and Mr. J is helping to extract the lessons from the story, from each person's story. So for some of our elders, or the elder generation, they're reading it and saying, you know what, I need to figure out is there a way that I can get in and begin to mentor someone. And so it's been pretty interesting to get the feedback. I think the eldest person that I heard from was in his 80s. He said, man, he called me about a couple of months ago. He said, Paul, I just read your book for the second time today. Excuse me, for the second time, and I read it all in one afternoon. And he said, I'm trying to figure out who else I can get this book in the hands to, because he sees the mentor aspect of it, and he says, who else can I mentor? Who else can I mentor? Even in his 80s.
Wow. And well, learning don't end, right?
Absolutely.
You don't stop learning until literally the day you leave here.
Yeah, that was very humbling, because this guy was actually one of my dad's mentors.
Oh,
wow, that's amazing.
Wow. So let's talk about. I want to take the little. Go ahead, Carla. Yeah. Carl, I'm sorry. I don't want to overtalk you. It froze up.
No.
I couldn't see you. Okay, say it again.
Oh no, I didn't say anything. I just was agreeing.
Okay, you froze up, so we kind of going a little slower.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna do a little twist on this, Paul. So there are people who want to be authors. You know, I'm an author as well, so I'm part of the club. I'm proud to be. But we are authors by chance. It wasn't like we aimed to be an author. It ain't like we went to school to be an author. It's not like we was like, oh, I'm going to write a book one day. Like, it's just a situation happened to us, and it made us want to take a pen and write because we wanted to help others. It wasn't for us. It was to help other people, right? So tell someone out there who has a story to tell, how can you encourage them to write a book about to be an author and write about their tale? Because I think a lot of us have stories to tell. We just don't think we could be authors. We think authors is something like this thing that only certain people could do.
That's true.
Right. Absolutely. I think I first got the vision for it maybe probably 10 years ago. I was sitting with a group, and I just had this vision of, man, maybe one day I want to write, because that's when that whole vision of, that whole parallel was with chattel slavery and the slave mindset actually happened. That was the first time. That was the first time that it actually hit me, and I said, man, I would like to write something about this one day. And what's funny is, over the course of years, I was like, I know I want to write, but how do I do it? Because I felt myself there, Regina. It's like, I want to write, but how do I do it? But it's amazing. The night that I started writing, I literally just took out my computer and started writing. I just took out my computer and started writing. At first it was in chronological order. Now mine is a story. Mine is an inspirational fiction story, so there has to be some type of order there. And I'm sure in a lot of self-help books there's some type of strategic order as well. But for mine, it definitely had to make sense, but being that it's a storyline. So I started writing that night. I had a Google document, and I just started typing. And my wife said, "You might want to use this app. I think it's called Evernote." Because what ended up happening is the power of a seed, and that story about the apples and so on and so forth, and where we dive deep into that. That was actually the third thing that I wrote. That was the third idea that I had, but it's actually chapter number 6. So what ended up happening for me is, like, anytime I would have an idea, I would just write. And I would write, and I'm like, okay, does this make sense? My wife and I, it's funny, we had actually come through a fairly challenging part of our marriage right around this time, and me being out of work, and then us having our third baby boy, and then her sitting up there on those nights with me, between 12 and 3 a.m. She's nursing the baby, and I'm writing. That was actually a part of it's a beautiful thing. It's actually part of our healing process, because she was right there by my side as I was typing on those late nights. But Regina, to answer your question, I just started writing, and I learned to not make it bigger than what it was. I think actually that after a while, I was probably a little backwards, so you might not want to follow my path. I actually started writing and then say, it might make sense if I have an outline, because and because I started writing, but I said, I definitely want to make sure that I hit certain points. So I said, I'm going to develop my outline, so at least I have some type of order. Make sure that I'm hitting all the notes that I think will help bring this book to life. So yeah, I just started writing, and I try not to make it bigger than what it was.
And that's great advice. And I actually started with an outline. The only reason why I started with the outline is because I had an editor that's helped me start right. Helped me, because I didn't see it happening. Because I see, like you see on TV, you see people that start typing on their typewriter, and they like, I got a brain, I can't think. I'm thinking like they just typing and they write a chapter and they finish. They write another chapter, they finish. She was like, you have to have an outline, because you have to kind of stay focused. Your outline, you just fill in your outline. That's how you write your books.
Yeah. And I was that person. That night I had an idea, so I started writing, and then I started writing some more. But I went back to the outline to make sure that I wanted to make sure that I hit all the things that I thought would be pertinent to the book. It's funny, I wrote the last chapter, and then I had to go back and write fill-in stuff, because when I got the idea for the last chapter, and once again, this is fiction, so I wanted to know, okay, I think what I'm writing here will be a good conclusion. And being that I had it at that moment, especially with fiction, there's so much creativity that has to go into it. So if I have an idea, I'm going to write while it's fresh to make sure that that I'm not losing it. And my editor came on the back end, and she actually helped me to really fill in, add more meat to the bones, if you will. And one thing that she told me, and this was something that I'll never forget, and I get it because my wife is also, my editor's a photographer, and my wife is also a photographer. One thing she said about fiction is that when you take a picture, you're snapping a picture, and all the details are already there. But if you're painting a picture, you have to go in there and you actually have to paint the details so that the viewer is able to see everything that's there. So it may take a little bit more time, but you're not taking a picture, you're painting a picture. And you want to be sure that the reader is able to clearly follow along, and that they're able to visualize everything as they're reading everything, every word that they're reading.
Yes. So we'll go ahead and let's share the book cover here. So Slave No More. All right. So everyone, I would say to you, please go out, and as you heard, you had a treat today. You actually had the author to tell you about his book. You know, you don't get that often, right? You don't usually get the author up here live in the fact talking about his book and giving you little pieces of his book. So yeah, hopefully you got enough to be intrigued and you're ready to go and purchase the book. So Paul, let us know where we can find your book.
You can find at any online retailer. You go to your favorite retailer, is there, is there, and bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Goodreads, all of them is there.
Can they go and physically pick up the book, or is all online?
It's in some bookstores. I don't know exactly where. I just found out a couple days ago that a store in China is carrying my book. I'm trying to figure out how that happened. I'm not asking any questions. But my publisher said, Paul, a store in China has your book. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not asking any questions about how it got there, but let's go.
That's how it works. Hey,
that's how the world and universe works, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
it gets into the hands that needs to have it. So absolutely.
Absolutely. But any retailer, anywhere books are sold, you can get it.
All right. So as you know, everywhere. So you can go to Barnes and Nobles and all the book locations online, as well as Amazon. Good old Amazon. Go to good old Amazon and get the book Slave No More. So Paul, so as we get ready to close up a little bit, I'll get closer to the end. Give us something in the book that will surprise someone.
Something that will surprise.
Or something that surprised you when you wrote it. Something that you got out that enlightened you of writing the book.
Probably, and that was such a rich time. And it's funny, I always go back every time I read it, because I'm not in the exact same place where I was when I was writing. So sometimes I'll go back and read it. Oh wow, that was pretty good.
That's a good point you made. As you write something, you in that moment of writing, right? Exactly. And so after you write and do it, you learn from what you wrote and did, and you move on. And then that's just a caption, a part of your life. The book Slave No More is a section of your life.
Absolutely. One of my favorite chapters, where I talked about the power of a seed. I talked about the fire hose thing. One of my favorite chapters to write. I'm picking between two. Damaged goods. Damaged goods. And there was a point when Bobby was just wondering, he's hearing these stories, and he's like, man, I see this person overcame this, and I see this person change the cycle of their family by choosing to make better decisions for themselves and having a mentor to help them along the way. But have I dropped the ball? Have I fallen down too much, or am I able to make up the ground from where I am currently? And Mr. J takes the time to talk to him about not being damaged goods. So what he does is he pulls out two grocery bags, if you will. One has canned goods in pristine condition, and the other has damaged goods, if you will. Now he takes 2 cans of soup, right, and he pours them in the bowl. They look exactly the same. If you look on the dates, if you look at the date, they have the exact same expiration date. But one you're able to get at full retail price, and the other you're getting at a fraction of the price because of the outward appearance, if you will. It's been beat up a little bit. It's been beat up a little bit, and maybe in life circumstances, maybe we've made some choices that we wish we could get back. We feel like our life has less value because of choices that either we've made or situations that we've ended up in. And part of part of the point that I was looking to drive home with this is that your life absolutely has value. It absolutely still has value. The same value that your life had before that circumstance, it still has value. The only thing is you might be better able to talk about it, being that you chose to overcome. You might be better to able to talk about it, being to learn from it, and now you're able to encourage someone else with the lessons that you learn from that challenge. Um, I share that because almost every time I read my book, it's almost like I've been through something recently where I have to be reminded of that same principle, that my
Mhm.
life still holds value and whatever purpose God has in the way, the way I believe, and the way, you know, um, which encouraged me along. It's been my faith. And every time I read that part of my book, I'm always encouraged that no matter what mistakes I've made, no matter what choices I've had, or whatever circumstances I've dealt with, my life still holds value. My life still holds value, and that's something that I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad you asked that question,
You're
because that's
welcome.
something. Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that. And yeah, and the one thing I'll say, and I say it's a lot of my blog, is like, how do you overcome? And it's simply this: you start from exactly where you are. You start from where you are. Everybody's not in the same place, and where you are is that's the best starting place for you.
There you go. Perfect. Perfect. I love that. That was great. Carl, you
Mhm.
have anything you would like to say, man?
No, I think this is going to be great. I'm going to look into this book, and because I haven't had an opportunity, but I think it's going to be very empowering for me. I have obstacles, every day, like everybody else. So it's good
Right.
to know. It's good to know, especially working for yourself and
Hmm.
overcoming doubts and self doubts and what you call what's the word that they imposter syndrome sometimes, and getting that
Yeah,
out of your mind, like, look at how far you come, look at what you're doing. I need that kind of encouragement. I think this is a great book based on what you're describing for someone like me. So absolutely will
Yeah.
look.
absolutely.
Yeah. You
Hmm.
got to keep reminding, it's not just end all be all. You got to keep reminding yourself
Yep, all
that,
the time.
man, it's a lot of work because I'm in this world too now. So I just
Hmm.
joined the corporate. I mean, I left the corporate and just joined the entrepreneurship world. And
Mm,
some days it seems like things are not happening, and you got to remember things are working in the background. Just because
Hmm.
you don't see it right now doesn't mean it's not happening. And you got to keep
Right.
reminding yourself why you here and your purpose and your purpose. Because when you at a job, it tells you your purpose. You know they model and their mission, right? They
yeah,
give it to you, but when you got to do it for yourself, it's a whole nother ball game. So I'm
Hmm.
going through that too, Carla. I got to keep reminding myself
Yep.
why I'm gonna do this. Because when it's excitement and happening, but eventually, you got to
Yes.
keep on working yourself, keep pushing
Yeah.
yourself.
You got to keep encouraging yourself and finding your why, and keep, yeah. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So this book is definitely will tell you why you're not a slave no more. You
Nope.
mhm.
you are the what do you call it, the ship of your destiny. What's that saying they always say?
The
You
captain of
are
your ship.
Thank you. You're the captain of your ship, so you have to make
Mm,
that happen. So before we go, I got to do a couple of things, and we'll come back and we'll close out. Um, I would like to let you know about our sponsorship opportunities. If you're interested in being a sponsor for Let's Talk, we would love to have you. It's $15 per show, and we will do this, advertise you on our show, so you'll be able to get more exposure for your product or your service or your book, either or. So if you're interested, you can just go to Let's Talk 1943 at gmail.com. Is give me an email and I'll send you over the information that you need to fill out. And it's $15 per show. Next is, sorry about that. So I actually have a seminar coming up, or a conference coming up in Atlanta on July 9th. It's called Ring Out Your Sponge. as I was listening to Paul describing his scenario with the what you used, the fire.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
Ring Out the Sponge is this. Oh my God! I was like, oh, it sounds like mine. Ring Out the Sponge is basically getting rid of the old beliefs, your old processes, your old ways. You got to wring out your sponge, and now you're able to receive and to absorb new ideas, new processes, and new mindsets. And it would be me plus two other speakers that you see up there, Kimberly Bell and D. Marie Moreau. They will help you with your traumas. They will help you with overcoming and be able to help you as well as myself. And we're going to get you to wring that sponge out. And we're going to get you out and get you ready to receive new and become that person and find your purpose. So if you're in the Atlanta area on July 9th, join us and you'll have a chance to win a cruise, like a real cruise. So you'll be able to win a cruise on our Ring Out Your Sponge cruise that we're going to have next May, Memorial Day weekend. And you will be able to win a free cruise on our Ring Out Your Sponge cruise conference. So please, you could go to the same place here, www.letstalk1943.com, or actually the email gmail.com, either or, and we'll be able to give you some information. All right. And let's see. One more. Oh, two more actually. Our podcast. You are able to hear us. So if you can't watch it, you're able to go to our podcast on anchor.fm/let's dash talk 1943, and or you could go to Google, you go to Apple, you go to Breaker. We are found on 6 different platforms for our podcast. You'll be able to listen to these shows as you in your car or at the home, whatever. So please check us out on podcasts for Let's Talk 1943. And our next show was going to be on Sunday, June 26th, 7 o'clock. And the title of the show is Insurance, Building a Legacy. Insurance, Building a Legacy. A lot of us in the Black community do not have insurance. We're not insured high enough. We don't have that protection for our children. And we need to start doing this. I know a lot of things happened recently. A lot of celebrities passed away. A lot of them didn't have insurance. And a lot of GoFundMe's out there right now. You know, you shouldn't have to depend on GoFundMe to bury your loved one. So we want to get you prepared. We want to help you out, kind of show you how easy it is. So join us on Sunday, June 26th, 7 p.m. for the Insurance Building a Legacy. And we're going to have 2 great speakers that will be able to tell you about the insurance industry and how it works. So now let's go around the horn. So Paul, do you have anything you would like to tell us before we leave out today?
I'll just end it the same way I always sign off, whether it's Fatherhood No Fly or, Slaves No More. It's just simply this: we're learning and we're growing and we're getting better one day at a time. So just start from exactly where you are. Just take it one day at a time, and you'll reach your goal.
All right, Carla, you have anything you want to say before we close out?
Just same thing that I said earlier, a few minutes before the yeah, so I'm straight. I think, like I said, I'm going to check it out. Like I said, it helps someone like me. Definitely, this book would definitely. So in my issues when it comes to confidence and knowing that I'm moving in the right place and continuing to remind myself that, yes, you're doing it. Keep going. You have what it takes. Yes.
It's so obvious, right? Because I see it all the time with you. I see that you're doing it. You've been doing it for a couple of years now. So you kind of think like, oh, yeah, she got it. She knows she's doing it. She's doing it every day. But you don't really realize that a person, they don't see what you see all the time, especially when you're doing it day in and day out, day in and day out, day in and day out. So I have to keep that in mind, Carla, because I see what you're saying. I have to kind of keep pushing myself too. So. So see, you got us talking, Paul. You got us talking. Yes, you got us talking. But I would like to, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in today to Let's Talk, and I would like to say thank you, God, thank you, Jesus, for allowing us to have this today, this platform with Paul. And I'm so happy that you're allowing us to plant these seeds in our audience to be able to be better people and to advance in their lives and be able to live in their purpose and live their passions and write books and everything else that you could be doing right now. That's what we're here for. God provide us with this platform for us to talk to y'all because we are learning as we're going as well. Yeah, Paul hit a lot of things today that we do. We are learning as we go, just like you are. We just have a platform to do it on, and it's just at the masses, but we don't know it all. But with these guests that we have, like Paul up here, that is telling us this great information. So thank you, Jesus. Thank you, God. Appreciate it. So I would like to say thank you. We are so happy that you joined us today. Invite a friend. Let's talk again. Until next time, God bless. We see you on June 26th, 7 p.m. Paul, hold on. Don't hang up.
Yeah, thanks for having